to our first panel of the day, which is focused on media, looking at new frontiers, new technologies, innovation, and looking as well, I suppose, on the discussion, further, sort of going to the point to today's performance. Again, reactions by the public, audiences, and how technology, behaves responsibly or not, I suppose. The theme is still, part and sort of the discussion for the remaining of the summit. So without further ado, I'd like to welcome the guest speakers. So the moderator is the US editor from The Economist, John Prideaux, please. And we have Ricardo Karam, TV presenter, founder of Takreem. Join us on the floor. Fantastic. Ammar Bakshi, founder of Shared Studios. Thank you. And Maher Shmeiteli, head of the Middle East and North Africa, Reuters. Thank you all. You have the floor.
Thanks, Mohammed. Thank you. Let's see if this is working. Thank you, Mohammed. Good morning, everyone. Watching that was uplifting, but also kind of exhausting. So we're going to try and sort of energize you a little bit with this discussion. We're going to be talking about new frontiers and technology in the media, which we've been doing a little bit for the past couple of days. But we're also, because we have a couple of distinguished journalists from the region, we're also going to talk a little bit more than we have in the past couple of days about doing journalism in this part of the world. But let's start with the kind of technology and innovation part. Ammar, tell the audience a little bit about Shared and
Sure.
your business, what you guys do.
Sure. I used to be a journalist, and I went to law school and ended up an artist. And I think that journey I can explain and make some sense. In 2006 and 2007, I was a reporter for the Washington Post. And I traveled around the world interviewing people in a dozen countries about what they thought of America. And this was during Bush, not Trump. So I can't imagine doing it now. And two experiences while on the road were very impactful. One was when my cameras were off and I was on a long bus ride from one part of a country to another, alone talking to a stranger. Because they didn't know me and I didn't know them, we ended up having some of the most powerful, moving conversations of my life. And when I came back to the US, I found that whenever I was on a bus or a train, I was looking at my phone or listening to a podcast, and I never talked to someone just to come to understand their lives. Technology was separating me from the people around me. Similarly, I was the first member of my family to go to Pakistan since partition in 1947, and my grandmother was reading my articles, but what she really wanted was not to know about the politics of Pakistan that day, but she wanted to know what the neighborhood she grew up in felt like, what the bakery she used to go to serve now. And I said, Nanny, don't worry, one day you'll be able to wear Google glasses and walk around as a hologram and talk to whoever you want. And so even though the technology was better than ever, when she passed away a couple years later, she wasn't connecting to anyone in Pakistan. And so those things affected me, and I thought, well, what would she have wanted? She would have wanted to enter a coffee shop, share a chai with a stranger in Pakistan, just to reconnect. And that insight led to what I do now, which is portals. We have a network of 40 gold shipping containers around the world. And when you enter one, you come face-to-face live with someone in an identical one somewhere else on Earth, live and full body. It's like a full-body video conference. And so the idea is you can walk in and share a coffee from Pakistan to a refugee IDP camp in Erbil, to a tech hub in Gaza, to a modern art museum in Mexico City. And the vision of what we're trying to create is a world where we harness technology to forge connections between diverse groups rather than get ever more insulated in our own tribes. And we think that you need a human network to do it, and that technology alone is not enough. So thanks for indulging that, but I think that sketches out where I fall in this.
That's very helpful. Thank you. Maher, I want to come to you. You work for Reuters, one of the most kind of storied brands in journalism that has been doing, in some senses, the same thing for a long time, getting the news kind of first, getting it right. But even in the field that you've been working in for a while, which is one of the most traditional fields of journalism, war corresponding, technology has changed what you do a lot, right? Can you explain a little bit about how that's happened?
Oh yes, tremendously. I mean, technology has been a huge enabler for news gathering in so many ways. For instance, I just like spent 3 years in Iraq as bureau chief for Reuters there, and just like it happened when the war with Islamic State was raging. And you can't, I can't describe how much, like tools like satellite imagery. You have so many Earth observation satellites, like hundreds of them, just like chronicling the Earth every day. And the way they, you can just like sometimes see things. You can check things on the ground. You can see, if you want, like population movements. You can see military movements. You can see mass graves if you want. I mean, the resolution has become so much, like really so good. We can't yet identify people by their faces. But we can do is we can see people, we can see machinery, we can see structures, we can see so many things like fences and all of that. And this is extremely important because, as you know, just like having access to the place is almost like half the job. Like if you get there, then you're almost like done, almost like half what you need to do in terms of getting the story out. And like satellite imagery is one way of doing it. I mean, like obviously you need to check what you're seeing. Obviously you need to have some specialist training to be able to interpret the data you're seeing. I mean, like not everybody can read these images. But certainly, like this is one area where there was like a tremendous change in our business, and it's good for us. The other thing is, the social media and blogging. This is another, like it's changed immensely the way we can see things because, like every one of us has become like a newsmaker in many ways, and this is great, like anybody in any village can tell you what's happening in his village. Now you can ask me the question, and I'm asking it to myself, okay, how do you know this is true? Now obviously you need to go through some form of due diligence, making sure that this, what you're hearing matches, is double-checked, is triple-checked, you're making sure that, like going through the due diligence that we're all aware, we're all used to as journalists. But this is also a great thing, it's, I can give you the example in Mosul. We had Mosul Eye, the famous Mosul Eye. He was just like tweeting. He was the only one tweeting from Mosul. I had complete blackout in Mosul. Nobody was tweeting, nobody was talking, no Facebook, no nothing. And this guy was just like putting, this guy or this girl maybe. We knew that later on it was a guy, it was a him, and we have his face, we know who he is. But at one point he was telling us things, and because he was telling you things, you couldn't choose because you didn't know who this guy or who this girl was. But he gives you things that you can check by talking to other people, by talking to refugees, by seeing satellite imagery from the sky, and you would figure out how things are inside Mosul now, the place where no journalist had access to, other than those who were unfortunately caught, and we all know what happened to them. So I'm a big fan of technology. I'm all for it, and I hope,
It's very interesting because quite a lot of the conversation in the past couple of days has been about social platforms and the ease of spreading, kind of false information or the kind of race to the bottom clickbait sort of stuff. So it's quite interesting to hear that from a war reporting point of view, actually, these different technologies are incredibly helpful. I mean, if you are reporting on wars 20 years ago, you either had to be embedded with one of the sides. There were a lot of journalists embedded with the US Army in Iraq, for example, which gives you already a particular perspective. Or, there were lots of kind of rumors about what had happened in the battle that were very hard to check. And now you can check things in real time. It's remarkable.
Absolutely. I heard that the next step would be to have video from the sky, instead of just like taking pictures and waiting for the next orbital pass or the next satellite to go over the same spot that you want. Just like the next frontier for us would just like having video. And just like they're having still pictures of the Earth being chronicled, just like having video taken of the Earth as it's moving and changes. And, for us, the impact, covering environmental things like rubbish dumps, like changes to the coastline, like investigative stories. It's amazing what we can do. And we can focus more as storytellers. We can focus more on the story than on the logistics and the pain. We have to go through bureaucracy to get the permits and to get the access and to get all of these. It's just like great. And I think, just like looking forward to the next milestone in these technologies, really.
That's fascinating. Thank you. Ricardo, let's come to you. Can you tell us a little bit about how new technologies have changed what you do?
Actually, I've been in the media field for the past 25 years. And when I've started, everything was different. And I have witnessed all those changes, and it was difficult for me to cope with those changes. Because every day something new was happening, and every day there was a new innovation being implemented. What I do is a little bit different from my colleagues here. I have decided some years ago to focus on human nature, on human funds. And I've been focusing on spotting remarkable people all over. I've noticed in the region where I live, because I'm based in Beirut, although I live in the plain, that the youth has lost hope, and they needed inspiration, and they needed people to look up at. So everything I've been focusing on for the past 10 years is mainly that, and merely that. Looking for ordinary women living in rural areas and bringing a positive change, helping the community, nurturing them with knowledge. So this is what I've been doing. However, if I'm going to talk about technology, in my field, I believe that there is a big gap. There is a big gap because human funds is not really focused on. We look for news, and we live in a world of immaterial. Human funds is not a priority. What we focus on today are images. What we focus on are maybe fake news. What we focus on is a word of what we call fashionista. When you want to tweet about something interesting, very few people follow that. Tweet, retweet, like that. But whenever there's something out of the box, there is defamation, they do it. Okay. They like this spicy kind of news. So this is why, I've been really a part of this kind of media, and innovation has not been within really what I'm doing. I try within the traditional tools, and we try through the...
It allows you to reach a larger audience, I'm guessing, than you may
Not
have,
to that extent. It's so difficult. It's really so difficult. And even media does not help a lot. Journalists, the different media do not help a lot. For us to be able to have a small editorial in a newspaper is not an easy thing. For us to be able to have a content on a TV station is not at all an easy thing. We are struggling a lot to have this exposure to put under the spotlight those remarkable human beings, and it's being really difficult.
A lot of new technology comes out of Silicon Valley, which is a place that has a bias towards a kind of techno-optimism, right? Anything new is good and better, almost by definition, and that's one of the kind of premises that the place runs on. When a lot of the new social technologies came online, kind of Twitter, Facebook, there was a view in Silicon Valley that around the world these would be tremendous for freedom of speech, that kind of technology and freedom of speech sort of go together. It hasn't worked out quite like that. Can you tell us a little bit, Ricardo, about your experience kind of covering the region, how your freedom to say whatever you want has changed, but particularly at home in Beirut?
Personally, I believe that freedom should have a ceiling. And freedom is more horizontal. But however, there should be really some constraints for freedom. Otherwise, it becomes a pure chaos. I live in Lebanon, and in Lebanon, it's known that we have a freedom of expression, freedom to say what we want, and freedom to express ourselves in the way we want. This is a slogan. Today, if you tweet about something that does not conform to the regime, to specific people, you are imprisoned. Today, if you attack the head of state, the president, you go to jail. You're arrested 1, 2, or 3 days. And you're questioned, and there's a long investigation. During the era where we had Syrian presence in Lebanon, things were also different, and we had a lot of assassinations in Lebanon. We lost some of the pillars of the media field in Lebanon, mainly Samir Asir, Gibran Twaini, We had some journalists who are still alive, but however, they are half alive. And I'm talking about a colleague of mine. Her name is Maishidia. She lost her arm, she lost her leg. She's still alive, but what kind of life? She's a big fighter, but her life has changed. You know, you face upheavals, but you need to cope with those upheavals. So Lebanon, with respect to other Arab countries, of course, is privileged, but still, freedom of expression is not absolute. In what I do and what I've done, I've been questioned many times. I've been investigated many times, and for long hours. When I shifted my career, and this career took me to what I'm doing now, investing in human funds and human minds, I still receive threats. I receive threats from big families in the Arab world. For instance, I'm going to give you some examples. One of those days, I was focusing on Iraqi diaspora, and I was looking for some interesting Iraqis scattered all over. And I found a lady, let's say, who was trying to restore and to get back all the art pieces that were stolen and trying to spot them and get them back. And it's a long procedure. And one of those days, I had, you know, a head of nuclear engineering department at MIT. Those Iraqis that constitute the Iraqi diaspora, they give hope to the youth in Iraq. And those people, they need someone to look up at, of course, you know, to get motivation, to be empowered, inspired, to be nurtured with hope and with a willingness to make a step forward. And one of those days, I received a call. And actually, he was a prince. And he told me, I am X. And now Ricardo Karam is interviewing somebody from Iraq, from a specific community. And this guy, you're saying that his village is a source of knowledge, of sciences, of wisdom, which is true. The guy comes from Najaf. And Najaf, you know, historically, this is, you know, what Najaf is about. So your life is going to be in danger. Watch out, and it won't end up like here. And it did not end up. And they kept on threatening me. I kept on receiving phone calls at different patterns, different hours, day and night. They were able to get, you know, the phone numbers of my houses, and they were calling me, you know, for a whole year, and then, you know, I had to sue them, etc. So this is a kind of threat we can receive every day. You know, another threat, for instance, you know, once I had an important female, an important lady, and who is no longer at her position, and I got a call, you know, from the Diwan of that specific country, and I didn't get the call. The owner of the TV station I used to work with got a call, and he was asked to stop my show, and my show was canceled. You know, it was in October, I had just started 1 month before, and I had a call, and it was told to the head of that station, there is only one queen, and this lady is no longer a queen. So those are the kind of threats, you know, I've been receiving for the past 10 years, which is different, you know, from the threats Hani or other people or colleagues, you know, are receiving.
Working for Reuters, I'm imagining, protects you to some extent from that sort of intimidation. I mean, you have to worry about whether somebody's going to blow you up, right? When your leg was injured in a grenade attack in Mosul. But do you have to worry about these sorts of things?
Yeah, very much. You know, like we have to worry about like threats, blackmail, all kinds of risk. I mean, like this is related to any story. I mean, like don't forget, if you write a story about this guy, another guy is going to be. I mean, especially in the context of. I mean, let's face it, the whole region is boiling and, you know, like the whole region is on fire and everybody's fighting against everybody almost now. Everybody, I mean, we can't find like we don't have, you know, like everybody's taking sides more or less. So if you're writing something, even though we're neutral, we're independent, we're just like factual, we really go about our coverage in so many we double and triple check, and we submit it really to so many verification to make sure that it's independent and nobody can say anything about that it's biased or anything. You know, somebody is going to say, oh, this is pro this, or your story is pro this, or against this guy, or against this party. And therefore, you know, like you always end up, especially in a situation like wars, like Iraq, for instance, you know, like it happens very frequently. So no, you do have to worry on, you know, like about this. You do also have to worry about the other aspect of physical threat, which is like, you know, just like getting killed, wounded. And, you know, like Reuters has paid like a heavy, and journalism in general, including Reuters, you know, like in Iraq, you know, like we're talking about 40 people killed and wounded, just like in the last few months of the war. You know, many of them were Iraqis, some of them were non-Iraqis. We've heard like those journalists. So yeah, I mean, like what I'm saying is, it's really, we have to be very almost like I'd say paranoid, but we have to be very conscious that it is a dangerous business. We have to be always. I mean. First, the environment is risky. It's a dangerous environment. This is a dangerous neighborhood we're living in. I mean, I'm talking about the Middle East and North Africa to start with. And then the nature itself of our business is, I mean, just like remember this journalist in Malta who was killed because she was part of the Panama File, right? The Panama File investigation, you know, and she was killed. I don't know whether it's linked, but, you know, and this is Malta. This is peaceful Malta we're talking about. So let's just imagine this is happening in peaceful Malta. What would be happening in our region, which is on fire? So yes, absolutely, you know, like, and that's why we go through training. This is why we go through, you know, like every 3 years, journalists who are going to go to war zones have to go through what we call a hazardous environment training. And you always have to escalate any threat you receive. You cannot dismiss it, you know, like phone calls, anything that you get has to be escalated to your management, because remember, this is not about you. I mean, like often we have like these regimes threatening Ricardo, for instance, you just like send it. And often they would pitch it as it's against Ricardo. The problem is Ricardo. We have nothing to do. It's not The Economist. It's not BBC. It's not Reuters. It's him. It's him. He has an agenda. And of course, it's not Ricardo. It's not me. It's not you. And it's not Amr. It's what we do, which they hate, which they don't want. Right? And it has to be escalated, and it has to be dealt with in an institutional form where the whole company and even the trade, our own, you know, journalistic body, would treat it as if this is not about John or Amr or Ricardo. This is about us. This is about our trade. This is about journalism. So it's very important also to put on this message to those who are now growing up, you know, like just like being nurtured in our trade and our business in journalism, to tell them, they're not going to come to you and tell you, hey, if you don't shut up, you're going to end up in this, and we're going to do this to you, etc. They're going to come to you and say, hey, John, I like you very much, man. Why are you doing this? Why are you writing this? You know how much I care about you. Isn't this a threat? It is a threat. So it won't come always like straight like this in your face. It will come in different forms. You know, and we have to be aware that this is intimidation, this is threat, this is meant for you not to publish what you want. This is what you know. They want you to. They don't want you to publish. So yes, I mean, like, I hope I answered your question. But
you're mentioning the hostile environment training. That's something the Economist journalists get sent on as well before we go off to dangerous places. Yeah. I spent 3 years in Brazil, which is not the most dangerous country, but has, you know, some dangerous neighborhoods. And so I was sent off on this ridiculous course beforehand, which was run in a hotel in Wales by ex-SAS people. And all the Economist correspondents before I went said, okay, there's this thing. One night, they're going to try and burst into your room and kidnap you. But if you move your bed to by the window, and if you sleep with the window open, and if you're on the first floor, you can jump out the window before they come in. So that was the main thing I took away from this. We've talked a little bit about, in the past couple of days, there's been, you know, a lot of people like us from sort of large-ish media organizations trying to explain what we do, and a bit, in some of the workshops at least, a bit of an undercurrent that people feeling, well, you know, to some extent, big media is the problem, and one of the wonderful things about technology is that it allows, you know, lots of people to get their own voices out there, unmediated by people like us. What you do to some extent fits into that. I was wondering what you felt about that bigger question, whether it's hard for me to see, I'm not objective, whether I'm part of the problem.
I think that our institutions in tech have addressed us as individual consumers. So we have an individual Facebook account or Twitter account. We buy home devices. And that way of framing the integration of technology into our lives has consequences, as opposed to, for example, technology being a community resource. We frame it as an individual resource. I begin that way just to say the way we integrate technology into our lives is not given. It's not inevitable. In the same way that we were at one point talking about global interconnection as inevitable, all of these things are tools to be deployed purposefully. And I think one thing we've done up until recently is give technological innovation a bit of a pass. The platforms will evolve, they will either be more democratic or they won't. But of course, these things don't, like any tool, you can use a scissor to cut someone or make a collage. There's nothing inherent in it. I think that that's true of technology. And I think that these days, so much information is produced and sent to you as an individual consumer that it's not just big media organizations or tech companies, it's a whole mode of address that I think we can move beyond, from being addressed as a YouTube creator or a consumer to being part of a dialogue or a conversational unit. When groups like Facebook talk about community, they think in terms of millions. But no human community has millions of friends. We max out at about 150 people that we can actually get to know. And so what happens online is we ensconce ourselves in viewpoints without ever really knowing the people who share them, and certainly without engaging people unlike yourself. So that's a long preface of saying, with portals and what we do, the whole idea is it's not the technology. It's not that you can enter a gold container and talk to someone somewhere else on Earth. The point is that there's a human being who's standing at the entrance who encourages you to enter and engage someone unlike yourself. Another way of thinking about it is, even though we have Google that allows you to find any book you want at any time, you still need teachers and librarians. Why? Because you need a human community that values knowledge. You need to say to the 4-year-old kid, I know you want to go run around outside, but learn to read, because when you do, it'll open up a world of richness. You'll live a fuller life. It's an end in itself, and it'll help you get a job and all these other things, but that's not the point. What we say with portals in our network of people around the world is, similarly, come in and engage someone who you would never talk to before. If you're, Make America Great hat, come and talk to someone in a hijab halfway around the world. Because it might be awkward at first, it might not be your natural inclination, but when you do, it opens up a world of richness. You live a fuller life. It's good in itself, and it might help you get a job. It might help you launch a new album. It might help you take advantage of technology and globalization. But these things on their own, a dialogue around these institutions as they are, I think misses the point that, as the artist before us said, human beings are the ultimate value, and we've really gone a long way from recognizing our role in asserting that value in our economy, in our media, and in the kinds of interactions we create.
So your work, at its best, helps to break down preconceptions people might have about whoever is at the other end of the...
At its best, it encourages people to embrace difference as a good in itself. And sure, that has at least 3 values, right? One, when you engage someone unlike yourself, you realize new possibilities for your own freedom. You see how someone else can live, and it can change how you conceive of what's possible for yourself. 2, it does what you're describing. If you see someone who is a Syrian refugee and they're actually friends and now you're making a rap album together, well, it changes how you look at a whole part of the world, which in turn can open you up to a rich culture and maybe find a new market for the rap album you want to create. But then 3rd, and most importantly, if you don't ever have a conversation with someone where there's no preconceived end, and this is where art becomes important, if you don't sit down and talk to someone and say, this is what I find valuable, not because someone's paying me or because I'm trying to get elected, but because this is what I authentically believe, if you don't have that with someone who disagrees with you, politics is impossible, right? Politics becomes a war of means, which is what we have now. Who's paid you to say that? And the critical component of media, of journalism, in its best is to say, look, we're not paid to say this. This is the truth as we understand it. And as opinion journalists, this is what we authentically believe. But I think that given where we are in this moment, taking that step back from projecting one's voice, narrowing the scope of your intervention is important. Silicon Valley talks about scale. Well, to what purpose, right? Until it's in every house, it's not changing the world. What does that mean? I think that recognizing that smaller acts of dialogue, courage, of all the things that we're describing here are what are essential, and technology is one tool among many, but by no means a saving grace for our democratic politics.
Ricardo, we talked a little bit yesterday about the way in which media can reinforce stereotypes and prejudices, and the way in which, you know, in the good sense, it can help to break them down, and Anna has touched on that. I know in your work, you like to try and, to the extent you can, kind of upend people's expectations in the stories you do. Try not to reinforce stereotypes about life in the Arab world. Can you tell us a little bit about how you go about doing that?
Yeah, before that, I'd like to comment on what both my colleagues said. I think the worst feeling that can eventually inhabit a journalist is to wake up every morning and to have fear. To fear while heading to his office that he might lose his job. And this is something we live on a daily basis in the Arab world. All the journalists are afraid to lose their jobs. One phone call to the manager, to the CEO of a media company, and you can be sure you can be ejected and you can be thanked for your work. So this is one. Journalists are not protected. Journalists have got no freedom. Very, very, very limited investigative journalism in the Arab world, because if you go deep in any issue, one phone call can eventually come to the head and he will cut your head. So this is true. This is one. Talking about innovation, I'd like to stop a little bit here. Maybe it's out of the flow of the conversation. However, two weeks ago, I was in Amman, and I was fortunate to be able to visit virtually the Museum of Palestine, Palestinian Museum, which is in Birzeit, where as a Lebanese, I cannot go. And it was beautiful, you know. It was a journey of 20 minutes where I visited every corner of that museum. And at the end of that virtual museum, I have literally cried. I was tearful. And I had mixed feelings. And when the visit finished, I said, well, you know, I've been there, but effectively, I was not there. This virtual world take us to platforms that are not real. And this is how our life became today. You know, all our images are digitalized. All our images are saved in a cyber world. None of us remembers the birthday of our friends who were our friends post-Facebook era. Unless, you know, Facebook gives us a notification, we do not remember the birthday of our friends. Since we follow some people on Twitter, on Facebook, there is always something formatted for us, recommended for us. We receive everyday notifications that this is recommended for you. So everything now is tailored in our life. And I think we long and we miss simple information. We have access to everything. However, accessibility did not bring inclusion, and connectivity did not bring empathy. And I believe, you know, this is, for me at least, my generation, and I think many people are from my age here, maybe they disagree with me, but however, this is how I think. I think that innovation, I think that technology has, because it's today open to everybody, and we can have anything we want. At the same time, it made us feel that we need the simple things in life and the simple info. To go back to your question, and listen, when I have established a foundation 10 years ago, it's called Takreem. And Takreem is a foundation that spots every year 8 people from Arab origin who have brought a change to the world in sciences, technology, environment, philanthropy. And the objective is to inspire the young people on one hand, and on the other hand is to portray a better image, a better perception of the Arabs worldwide. And when I first launched this foundation, I remember there's a friend of mine who lives in the States and who's filthy rich. He told me, listen, forget about me. I will not support you. I told him why. He said, come on, what you're doing is nonsense. Get me something flashy, something flamboyant, and you can be sure you can have, the amount you want. And I pursued my dream, and I never thought I would be able to make it grow and proliferate. The first year was so tough. The second year was even tougher. Third year, I said, well, it's going to be, the last year. I would eventually work and make this foundation sustain. And now this year, we're celebrating our 10th anniversary. And this year, after 10 years, we were able to put under the spotlight 100 achievers. And many people who are present here know well Takreem. They are followers. They come every year. They attend our activity, the workshops we do, the award ceremonies. And this human funds, I have mentioned at the beginning, and I keep on mentioning during the conversation, is very crucial. This is what will last. I want my kids to grow, and I want them to look at those inspirational figures. We need inspiration, I repeat.
Mahe, I just want to end with you, and then hopefully we can just have a couple of questions. There's a cliche about journalism that it's the first draft of history, and generally that's not really true. But in your case, in the wire services, Reuters, AP, Bloomberg, it really is. You don't get to look at what everyone else has done before you sit down and write your story. Is that a heavy responsibility? I mean, you're given a very privileged position in society where you have to sort of establish what the truth is before anyone else. Does that weigh on you, or do you just get used to it?
Well, let me say first that we are very conscious of this responsibility, and we are very conscious that we are privileged in one way. What we do is make sure that the news we are, our business is both B2B and B2C. I mean, mostly B2B, meaning we provide news to businesses, broadcasters, banks, traders, investors, people who depend on us to broadcast the news, and also sometimes to trade, to make money, or government sometimes to make policy. We are very conscious of our importance, and of the importance, not of our importance, but of the importance of what we do, that it's a huge responsibility, and what we do, what we write, can have huge repercussions on people's lives, on people's livelihoods. So what we do is make sure that every information, that, the most important element for us is accuracy. This tops our priorities. Speed comes next. Length, analysis, everything comes next. But accuracy is top. And the second thing, it has to be factual. We provide raw. Our first, what you call a draft, actually is just like what we've seen, what we've heard. And it's not like what we've heard, meaning like Ricardo's saying it's raining, but Amr says it's not raining. No. I'm not going to say he's saying it's raining and he's saying it's not raining. I'm going to see, I'm going to look out of the window and see, oh, it's raining. I would want to know why Amr is saying it's not raining. So it goes beyond just like saying X and Y are saying this. It also goes into our own fact-checking. We try to fact-check what's being said. And fact-checking has become hugely important. Imagine, everybody's tweeting, everybody's saying something in the blogosphere or on tweets or different platforms. So fact-checking has become a tremendous job that we do in terms of just like filtering this news that's coming in. And it's not only us, just like, you have this PolitiFact in the United States, which just like, it has like this Truthometer. Whenever somebody says something like, like recently I've seen somebody said that US middle schools are forcing pupils to pray 5 times a day. And of course, it's like complete rubbish, in a way. And it's good. I mean, like these platforms. In France, you have something similar by Le Monde. It's called Decodex. Also, you can just like put the story you want to check, and it gives you. So it's us. It's also about so many other initiatives meant for us to just like, as you said, like make sure that if you're right, and if we are writing the first draft for history, that at least this draft is factual. This draft has the elements, has the who, the why, the what, the how, and like the 4 W's and the H, for then the historians to go and just like do their job as historians. But the 4 W's and the H have to be there, and it's extremely important that we do it.
Okay, thank you very much. We've got a couple of minutes for questions. If you keep them short, we can get more in. I can see Carolina with her hand up.
And there's another one in the back on the right as well. Thank you.
Hi. Hello. Hi, I'm Carolina Guerrero. I'm a journalist from New York. The question is for you, Maher. Does Reuters have, what technology does Reuters use to protect their journalists from surveillance? And do you have any whistleblower policy?
We do rely very much on encryption. I mean, like, this is a very important question. Thank you for asking it. We do rely, like for us, relying on encryption is very important because, as you know, most of the investigative stories we write are often, we are going to disturb somebody, some interest, like politicians, business interest, you name it. So we do rely very much, like we try and use maximum encryption technologies in our communications, and reduce as much, like relying on technologies that are easily monitored, which is like phone calls, like some voice applications that are not encrypted. And the next level is, of course, like face-to-face meetings. Like there's nothing beats a face-to-face meeting at the end. Like in a specific location. So it's really about that. Like it's really about technology has been extremely important. Like if you look how like technology can allow journalists not to take risks. Like I can give you 2 examples if there is time. Like if you take the Rohingya crisis. You can see it. I mean, like, we have 2 journalists. You have 2 Reuters journalists in jail now, because of their coverage, because they were investigating these massacres. I mean, like, sorry, I'm calling massacres. We call it whatever. But we have these 2 journalists in jail. I can say that Reuters did everything it can to make sure that they get all the security going about their job. But at the end of the day, you don't have zero risk in our business. At the end of the day, some people are going to pay a price. Journalists are going to pay a price. Take Syria. We have Anthony Schdeide died in Syria. We have Mary Colvin died in Syria. We have so many. So journalism is paying a heavy price, and for covering stories. And we owe it to us. We owe it to us to take all the precautions to stay away from harm's way. Basically, this is extremely important for us. And Reuters, to the short answer to your question, is that yes, Reuters takes it very seriously, and we do everything we can to protect our journalists when they go about the business.
Just there's one in the back there, Jeff.
Thank you.
Please close.
Thank you for this interesting discussion about your experience, about your expertise as international journalist. I would like to ask just 3 small points. What should be the behavior of a journalist in a conflict area? The behavior of a journalist in an area where you have a conflict. The second one has to do with the independence of a journalist. Is it possible for a journalist to be independent, not to be political or with one or any parts? Okay. The third one has to do with everything we have around the world as conflict, as terrorism. Is there any international journalist association fighting for peace? Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, we've got 3 panelists, and we've got 3 questions within that question, which seems very neat. So, Maher, let's keep these brief, but one question in there about the responsibility of reporters, how they should act in a war zone. That, I mean, that's been your whole life, so it's hard to crunch it down to a minute, but do your best.
I have just one answer to your question, is that no story and no picture is worth the life of a journalist. This is the guiding principle for us. I hope it answers.
That's a very good, succinct answer. Yeah. Ricardo, there was a second question in there about independence, whether we can ever really be independent.
It depends where.
Yeah.
Where? Okay. Globally? Regionally?
Well, I mean, let's just begin with our own work, with your work. Let's say, are you able to be as independent as you'd like to be?
I think I am, and I've paid the price for that. I'm going to give you a small example, since you love examples. You know, we're all living now the nightmare of Carlos Ghosn. Carlos Ghosn, who is an iconic figure in the world of car industry. And Carlos has been in jail for the past 3 months. And nothing has been able to be done for him. And he went out for a couple of weeks, and he's back now to jail. And I received a call from the alliance of Nissan, Renault, Mitsubishi, who are partners in my foundation and who have been with me for the past 10 years. And literally, they told me, either you stop defending Carlos Ghosn and blogging and writing about him and doing shows to support him and heading groups and tweeting about him, or we stop funding you. I told them, stop.
Good for you.
And they stopped. So I'm independent, yeah.
Amma, just to come to you, the last bit of that and the hardest bit, there was a thing about the media sort of fixing world peace. I mean, it sounds like what you do is getting a little bit closer towards that sort of aspirational, you know, bringing people together who wouldn't otherwise talk to each other. You know, both of them hopefully come out of those encounters with a different perspective on the world.
Yeah, I would just say that it's a struggle to get people to value certain things. Art is part of that struggle, so is media, and we need people to value one another.
Okay, that's a good place to end. Thank you all very much.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Another fascinating panel. Thank you all for being here. Appreciate it. Come on, please. Thanks, John. Fantastic.